Cameras like
shellfish.
Last one, last audio check for anyone who needs it. Okay. Yep. And then everyone has their phones off, please.
Yes, definitely. You can take the shots. Like what? Plus 5? Plus 10. Hey guys, just
They call flying close to absolutely. Right.
Five minutes for the link of his prepared remarks. I do not yet have
2 minutes?
Thanks, good.
Just want some space?
No, not yet.
Oh.
That was not a 2.
This is on my Oso, right?
Yeah, yeah, it is on, yeah, sorry. Yeah.
I'm like looking at her.
Yeah.
ODS is tracking this, yes. Digital is tracking this.
Just say hi.
There it is.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Good. Good. Let's do that with your audio guys on Wednesdays. And then you're right back to the drive. So fruit. That's right. Hi, James.
You just started.
My friend working out there?
And Lisa makes introducing her to
Where are you from? That explains it.
No. So you understand Spanish?
which you might assume
Yes.
includes poorly, it's Spanish.
Yeah, I can find it out.
I don't want to risk it.
Mine's in the
I think it's being
But they've always
But what I get was
very light days, just about
Yes.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's what we did. Yeah, I think 2 minutes. Thank you.
Phones on silent.
Hey folks, how are you?
Sure.
Excuse me. Good afternoon. I'm heading off to East Palestine in a moment, but I wanted to say a few things this morning about
Olivia, thank you. Now we want to go to
Alexei
former President
Navalny.
Biden commenting on the reported death of Russian opposition leader
like
Alexei
millions of people
Navalny.
around
Let's
the
listen.
I'm literally both not surprised and outraged by the news. Reported death of Alexei Navalny. He bravely stood up to the corruption, the violence, and all the bad things that the Putin government was doing. In response, Putin had him poisoned. He had him arrested. He had him prosecuted for fabricated crimes. He sentenced him to prison. He was held in isolation. Even all that didn't stop him from calling out Putin's lies. Even in prison, he was a powerful voice for the truth, which is kind of amazing when you think about it. And he could have lived safely in exile after the assassination attempt on him in 2020, which nearly killed him, I might add. But he was traveling outside the country at the time. Instead, he returned to Russia. He returned to Russia, knowing he'd likely be imprisoned or even killed if he continued his work. But he did it anyway, because he believed so deeply in his country, in Russia. Reports of his death, if they're true, and I have no reason to believe they're not, Russian authorities are going to tell their own story. But make no mistake, Putin is responsible for Navalny's death. Putin is responsible. What has happened to Navalny is yet more proof of Putin's brutality. No one should be fooled, not in Russia, not at home, not anywhere in the world. Putin does not only target his citizens of other countries, as we've seen what's going on in Ukraine right now, he also inflicts terrible crimes on his own people. And as people across Russia and around the world are mourning Navalny today because he was so many things that Putin was not. He was brave, he was principled, he was dedicated to building a Russia where the rule of law existed and where it applied to everybody. Navalny believed in that Russia. He knew it was a cause worth fighting for, and obviously even dying for. This tragedy reminds us of the stakes of this moment. We have to provide the funding so Ukraine can keep defending itself against Putin's vicious onslaughts and war crimes. You know, there was a bipartisan Senate vote that passed overwhelmingly in the United States Senate to fund Ukraine. Now, as I've said before, and I mean this in a literal sense, history is watching. History is watching the House of Representatives. The failure to support Ukraine at this critical moment will never be forgotten. It's going to go down in the pages of history. It really is. It's consequential. And the clock is ticking. And this has to happen. We have to help now. You know, we have to realize what we're dealing with Putin. All of us should reject the dangerous statements made by the previous president that invited Russia to invade our NATO allies if they weren't paying up. He said if an ally did not pay their dues, he'd encourage Russia to, quote, do whatever the hell they want. I guess I should clear my mind here a little bit and not say what I'm really thinking, but let me be clear. This is an outrageous thing for a president to say. I can't fathom from Truman on, they're rolling over in their graves hearing this. As long as I'm president, America stands by our sacred commitment to our NATO allies, as they have stood by their commitments to us repeatedly. Putin and the whole world should know, if any adversary were to attack us, our NATO allies would back us. And if Putin were to attack a NATO ally, the United States will defend every inch of NATO territory. Now's the time for even greater unity among our NATO allies, to stand up to the threat that Putin's Russia poses. You know, I send my deepest condolences to Alexei's staff and supporters who are going to continue his work despite this loss, despite all of Putin's desperate attempts to stamp out the opposition, and most of all to his family, especially to his wife, his daughter, and his son, who have already sacrificed so much for their family and a shared dream for a better future for Russia. So I just want to say God bless Alexei Navalny. His courage will not be forgotten, and I'm sure it will not be the only courage we see coming out of Russia in the near term. Thank you. I'll be happy to take a couple questions.
Sir, first, was this an assassination?
The answer is that we don't know exactly what happened, but there is no doubt that the death of Navalny was the consequence of something that Putin and his thugs did.
And to be clear, you warned Vladimir Putin when you were in Geneva of devastating consequences if Navalny died in Russian custody. What consequences should he and Russia face?
That was 3 years ago. In the meantime, they faced a hell of a lot of consequences. They've lost and or had wounded over 350,000 Russian soldiers. They've made them in a position where they've been subjected to great sanctions across the board, and we're contemplating what else could be done. But what we were talking about at the time, there were no actions being taken against Russia. And look, all this transpired since then.
Can you say whether you're looking at increasing sanctions on Russia right now?
We're looking at a whole number of options. That's all I'll say right now.
Is there anything you can do to get ammunition to the Ukrainians without a supplemental from Congress?
No, but it's about time they step up, don't you think? Instead of going on a 2-week vacation. 2 weeks. They're walking away. 2 weeks. What are they thinking? My God, this is bizarre. And it's just reinforcing all the concern and almost, I won't say panic, but real concern about the United States being a reliable ally. This is outrageous.
Are you more confident now that you'll get the Ukraine aid, given what's happened today?
Well, I hope to God it helps. But I mean, the idea we need anything more to get the Ukraine aid. I mean, this is in light of a former president's statement that saying Russia, if they haven't paid their dues to us, go get them. Come on, what are these guys doing? What are they doing?
Sir, how concerned are you about the anti-satellite capability that Russia is developing, and what is your administration planning to do in response?
First of all, there is no nuclear threat to the people of America or anywhere else in the world with what Russia is doing at the moment, number one. Number two, anything that they're doing or they will do relates to satellites and space and damaging those satellites potentially. Number three, there is no evidence that they have made a decision to go forward with doing anything in space either. So what we found out, there was a capacity to launch a system into space that could theoretically do something that was damaging. Hadn't happened yet, and my hope is it will not.
Thank you all.
I'll take one more.
Thank you, Mr. President. Switching gears for a moment, have the Israelis presented a credible evacuation plan for the nearly 1.5 million displaced Palestinians sheltering in Rafah? And what would the consequences be for Israel if they move ahead with a full-scale ground invasion without clear measures to protect civilians there?
Well, first of all, I've had extensive conversations with the Prime Minister of Israel over the last several days, almost an hour each. And I've made the case, and I feel very strongly about it, that there has to be a temporary ceasefire to get the prisoners out, to get the hostages out. And that is underway. I'm still hopeful that that can be done. And in the meantime, I don't anticipate, I'm hoping that the Israelis will not make any massive land invasion in the meantime. So it's my expectation that's not going to happen. There has to be a ceasefire temporarily to get those hostages. And by the way, we're in a situation where there are American hostages. American citizens are being held hostage. It's not just Israelis, it's American hostages as well. And, my hope and expectation is that we'll get this hostage deal, we'll bring the Americans home, and the deal is being negotiated now, and we're going to see where it takes us.
An FBI informant at the center of the impeachment inquiry into you has been indicted for allegedly lying. Your reaction to that, and should the inquiry be dropped?
He is lying, and it should be dropped, and it's just been an outrageous effort from the beginning.
And
We did. See you in Ohio.
Thanks, Paul.
That was President Biden addressing the reported death of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny in prison. The president says he doesn't yet know what happened, but he says, make no mistake about it, Vladimir Putin is responsible. The president says this is yet another example of Putin's brutality and yet another reason the U.S. must pass new funding for Ukraine to fight the Russian regime. Let's bring in senior White House correspondent Selena Wang, foreign correspondent Maggie Rulli, and ABC News national security and defense analyst Mick Mulroy for more. Selena, Biden also criticized former President Trump here for saying he'd let Russia do what it wants with NATO allies who don't invest enough in defense funding. So much so that the president said he had to collect himself for a second to not say what he was really thinking. What stuck out to you from these remarks?
Yeah, Diane, you heard a lot of outrage in the president's voice, especially when he was talking about what Donald Trump had said about NATO, about encouraging Russia to invade Ukraine to do whatever they want if those countries don't contribute enough to defense spending. We heard the president double down on that. We've heard him being very critical of that before. He used this as another opportunity to do that. He also had a lot of outrage about Congress failing to approve that $95 billion national security spending package that would give more aid to Ukraine. He said, I hope to God this helps to get that across the finish line. You heard a lot of anger in his voice there. He wanted to use this as an opportunity to show this highlights the brutality of Vladimir Putin, and we cannot let that go unchecked. The president also used this speech, Diana, as an opportunity to admire and to praise Navalny. He said in stark terms, he said Navalny is what Putin is not. He said, quote, brave and principled. He talked about how for so many years, Navalny, he has been imprisoned, he has been persecuted, he was poisoned, but yet he stood out still as this shining light, as this beacon of hope for people in Russia. And the fact that this has happened, the president is saying they still don't know exactly how it happened, what happened, but make no mistake, he said, Putin was responsible, Putin was behind this. And just one last thing, Diane, the president was asked there by a reporter whether or not this would call for the imposition of more sanctions. The president didn't give any specifics, but said that they're looking at a whole range of options there.
And Maggie, Navalny was serving this prison sentence after returning to Russia from recovering from a poisoning that he says was done by the Kremlin. So how does this whole thing unfold now, and how do you go about finding out what really happened here, given his death happened in a high-security prison?
Well, Dan, that's going to be incredibly difficult. And the UN has called for a credible investigation into Navalny's death. But we know Navalny died at a penal colony 40 miles north of the Arctic Circle. He was in a Russian prison. It's going to be incredibly difficult to get any real credible details out about his death. And I think for me, though, what really stands out is that no matter what happens, no matter if any credible details come out, if we're ever really able to have a real investigation into his death, his legacy is going to live on. And this is a point Biden made time and time again. We heard him say Navalny is someone who stood up. He could have stayed in exile. He could have stayed safe, but he made the choice to go back to Russia on principles, and those principles will live on, I think, both in the Russian people and across the world, Diane.
And Mick, what do you make of the fact that we just saw Navalny at a hearing yesterday, seemingly in good health, a little thin, but other than that, you know, that seems to be the big source of surprise, is so many saying, you know, we just saw him yesterday and he seemed like he was fine. So what do you make of these reports now, just one day later, coming from Russian authorities saying he went for a walk and he collapsed and that was it?
So, Diane, I think that does add to the evidence that seems to be growing that he was essentially killed in prison. Obviously, it's the responsibility of the Russian government. Either way, they falsely imprisoned him, and most believe that they tried to kill him in the past, which, of course, could cause lifelong health issues. But I think we'll never hear the truth come out of the Russian government. This is going to have to be something that's reviewed as best we can by the international community. But ultimately, as the president and vice president said, it's Russia's responsibility. It's President Putin's responsibility.
All right, Selena Wang, Maggie Rulli, Mick Mulroy, thank you. And we will have much more of the day's top stories right after the break. Stay with us.
Tonight, the misconduct hearing and the fate of the Fulton County election interference case. Plus, the war in Israel, the hostages, where things stand. More Americans turn to the most watched newscast on television. World News Tonight with David Muir. Sunday morning, the 2024 race, Trump's legal battles, Ukraine, Israel, the border, and the funding fight. And millions listen to him. Now, Charlemagne the God from The Breakfast Club on the election ahead. Sunday on ABC's This Week.
Everything is so fine, little bit of sunshine. Some more, just a little bit. Breathe more, just a little bit. Smile a little more in a minute. I've been running through the strange life. Pictures on my phone like everything is so fine, little bit of sunshine.
Good morning, America.
From America's #1 news source comes the all-new ABC News app. Breaking news, incredible video, faster, smarter, and it can customize to you and your interests. If you love being in the know, you're gonna love this. Experience what all the buzz is about. Experience the all-new ABC News app. Download it now.
I just heard gunshots.
Breaking right now, a U.S. military member home for the holidays found dead.
Every officer had their cameras rolling.
How on earth did this happen?
He leaves the door, comes down the steps, and boom.
I could see his eyes.
You knew he was gone.
Yeah.
Now tonight, exclusive interviews.
My wife almost passed out.
And a father confronts his son's killer. Love, honor, and betray. All new 2020 tonight on ABC. ABC News Live Prime, winner of the Gracie Award for Best News Program in all of television. Stream ABC News Live Prime with Linsey Davis, weeknights on ABC News Live.
Real Housewives of Beverly Hills star Erica Jane.
Celebrity attorney Tom Girardi.
This story was a nuclear explosion. Today, several victims will get a chance to finally meet Erica Girardi.
I'm at sort of a loss for what to say.
Did you see the documentary?
The Housewife and the Hustler? I did.
I wanted Erica to say, I'm sorry, face to face.
Erica, why did it take you so long?
The Housewife and the Hustler 2, only on Hulu.
You should see me in the crowd. Gonna run, there's nothing to watch me looking down, one by one.
The strongest females fight for the survival of their families.
One by one.
Oh, hey, the queens.
You should see me in a crowd.
You're watching America's #1 streaming news. Keep streaming with ABC News Live. ABC News Live Prime, winner of the Gracie Award for Best News Program in all of television. Stream ABC News Live Prime with Linsey Davis, weeknights on ABC News Live.
Reporting on Capitol Hill, I'm Devin Dwyer. Wherever the story is, we'll take you there. You're streaming ABC News Live.
Welcome back to ABC News Live. First, here are some of the top stories we're following right now. We're learning more about the deadly shooting at the Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl celebration. Police now say 2 suspects in custody are under 18. Video shows the moment the shooting started. Authorities say that was the result of a dispute. Now a third person who was being held has been released. Last night, community members honored the victims at a candlelight vigil, including 43-year-old Lisa Lopez Galvan, who was killed, and the 23 others who were wounded. 9 Los Angeles firefighters are recovering after being injured by a gas explosion. LA officials say the firefighters were trying to put out a fire in a truck powered by natural gas when the tank exploded. 2 of the firefighters suffered critical injuries. The truck driver was not hurt. College basketball sensation Caitlin Clark now holds the NCAA women's all-time scoring record. Last night, the Iowa Hawkeyes surpassed the 3,527-point record set by Kelsey Plum in 2017. Lisa Bluter, Clark's coach, called a timeout so they could have a brief on-court celebration. But the 22-year-old already has another record in sight. She's only 99 points away from the all-time Division I record, men's or women's, a record that has stood for more than 50 years. Clark is eligible for another season, but she hasn't said whether she'll declare for the WNBA draft instead. We'll be right back.
Tonight, the misconduct hearing and the fate of the Fulton County election interference case. Plus, the war in Israel, the hostages, where things stand. More Americans turn to the most watched newscast on television.